Hello.
I never thought my wife's ultimatum would be the key to my freedom. 20 years of walking on eggshells, 20 years of sacrificing my identity to keep the peace. But that night, when she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Obey me or forget about intimacy," something inside me snapped. I did the one thing she never expected. I laughed in her face. "Keep it forever," I told her. The shock in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Her weapon of control had just backfired spectacularly, and neither of us realized that those 4 words would demolish the prison I'd been living in for 2 decades. The battle that followed would test everything: my resolve, my relationships with my children, and the very foundation of who I thought I was. My name is Daniel Crawford. I'm 48 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life trying to keep my marriage together for the sake of my kids. My son Michael is 15, a quiet, thoughtful kid who loves basketball and video games. My daughter Emma is 10, a bright-eyed little girl who sees the good in everyone. They're the reason I stayed as long as I did, convincing myself that a broken home would hurt them more than watching their father slowly disappear into someone else's idea of who he should be. It all came to a head on a Friday evening. The kids were at their grandparents' for the weekend, and Gwen and I were having one of our usual discussions about me going fishing with my buddies instead of attending her colleague's dinner party. "You never support me, Daniel. It's always about what you want," she said, standing in our bedroom with her arms crossed, chin tilted up in that way she had when she was about to lay down the law. I sighed, feeling the familiar weight of these conversations. "Gwen, I haven't had time to myself in months. This trip has been planned for weeks." "Well, this dinner party is important to me," she snapped. "But I guess that doesn't matter to you." "That's not fair," I started, but she cut me off. "You know what? I'm done arguing about this. Either you cancel that fishing trip and come my dinner party, or you can forget about any intimacy between us. Your choice." I stared at her, processing what she just said. It wasn't the first time she'd wielded our physical relationship as a weapon, but something was different this time. Maybe it was the smug certainty in her eyes, the absolute confidence that I would fold like I always did. In that moment, something inside me just snapped. I started laughing. Not the nervous chuckle of someone trying to diffuse tension, but a genuine, deep-bellied laugh. Her eyes widened, confused by my unexpected reaction. "What's so funny?" I shook my head, still smiling. "Keep it. Forever." "What?" "The intimacy. Keep it. If that's your bargaining chip, I'm out of the game." The look on her face, shock quickly masked by anger, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about the dinner party or the fishing trip. This was about control, pure and simple. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't playing along. I grabbed my pillow and a blanket from the closet. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." "Daniel, don't be ridiculous," she said, her voice now tinged with uncertainty. "You're overreacting." But I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I felt clear-headed, like someone had finally lifted a fog I'd been walking through for years. Without another word, I walked out of our bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. That night, lying in the guest bed, I realized something profound. I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of losing myself. And I already had, piece by piece, year after year. But no more. The moment she tried to use our most intimate connection as leverage, something fundamental had changed. Her manipulation had finally backfired, and now there was no going back. The morning after my unexpected stand against Gwen's ultimatum, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. Like someone had lifted a 100-pound weight off my chest that I'd gotten so used to carrying I'd forgotten it was there. I headed to the kitchen, bracing myself for round two. Gwen was already there, sitting at the island with her coffee, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, her expression a carefully composed mask of indifference. "Sleep well?" she asked, her tone suggesting she expected me to apologize. I poured myself coffee, taking my time before answering. "Better than I have in years." Her fingers tightened around her mug. "So you're still acting childish." In the past, that comment would have triggered my defense mechanisms. I would have explained myself, try to make her understand my perspective, maybe even apologize just to restore peace. The familiar script was practically begging to be followed. Instead, I just shrugged. If standing up for myself is childish, then yeah, I guess I am. I saw the flash of surprise in her eyes before she masked it with a scowl. This wasn't how our arguments usually played out. By now, I should be backpedaling, offering to cancel the fishing trip, promising to be more supportive. The kids will be home from mom's by 3, she said, changing tactics. Emma has ballet at 4:30. I know, I replied, taking my coffee and heading toward the door. I'm taking her. Where are you going? The question had an edge of panic to it. Out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't storm off. I simply left, got in my car, and drove to the local diner where I used to go before we were married. I ordered the full breakfast special and sat by the window, watching people pass by. My phone buzzed with texts from Gwen, but I didn't answer. Not out of spite, but because I genuinely had nothing to say. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't following the script. No desperate attempts to fix things. No walking on eggshells. No apologizing for boundaries that any reasonable person would respect. The silence between us wasn't a punishment. It was peace. By the time I picked up the kids that afternoon, something had shifted. The anxiety that usually churned in my stomach before facing when it had been replaced by a strange calm. Emma chatted happily about her weekend as I drove her to ballet, while I nodded and asked questions in all the right places. But inside, I was experiencing something revolutionary. The certainty that I deserved better than what I'd been accepting. And that changed everything. The weekend arrived, and despite Gwen's cold shoulder routine, I packed my fishing gear into the truck. Michael appeared in the garage doorway as I was loading the final items. Dad, Mom said you're not supposed to go this weekend. His voice held the careful neutrality of a kid who'd become an expert at navigating parental conflict. I closed the truck bed and turned to face my son. At 15, he was already almost my height, his face caught in that awkward transition between boy and young man. Your mom and I disagree on that, I said simply. But that's between us, not something you need to worry about. He shifted uncomfortably. She's pretty mad. I know, buddy. But sometimes adults need to set boundaries, even when it makes other people upset. Michael studied me, his expression thoughtful. Like when Coach Adams says we need to advocate for ourselves on the court. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. Exactly like that. I left before Gwen could create a scene in front of the kids. The weekend with my buddies at Lake Thompson was exactly what I needed. Hours of quiet reflection on the water, cold beers around a campfire, and conversations that didn't feel like navigating a minefield. On Sunday night when I returned, the house was quiet. Emma ran to greet me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Did you catch any big fish, Daddy? I showed her photos on my phone while Gwen watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression unreadable. That night, I slept in the guest room again. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I woke up early and went for a run. My body protested after years of neglect, but there was something exhilarating about the burn in my lungs, the sweat on my skin. I signed up for a gym membership that afternoon during my lunch break. Nothing fancy, just a basic place where I could rebuild what I'd lost. Not just physical strength, but the mental toughness I'd surrendered piece by piece over the years. Gwen noticed the changes immediately. At first, she made snarky comments about midlife crises and trying to recapture your youth. When that didn't get a reaction, she switched to concern. You're going to hurt yourself pushing so hard, she said one evening as I prepared a protein shake. You're not 20 anymore, Daniel. I just smiled. Thanks for your concern. Each day I reclaimed a little more of myself. I bought new clothes to replace the tired wardrobe she'd selected over the years. I got a haircut, not the practical trim she preferred, but something that actually suited my face. The physical changes were obvious, but the mental transformation was more profound. The fog of anxiety that had surrounded me for years began to lift. I started making decisions without second-guessing myself, without wondering if Gwen would approve. For the first time in decades, I was becoming my own person again, and it felt like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. 6 weeks into my transformation, I ran into Dave Miller, an old friend from college I hadn't seen in years. We'd lost touch after Gwen had decided he was a negative influence because of his divorce and subsequent bachelor lifestyle. Crawford? Holy hell, man, is that you? Dave clapped me on the shoulder at the local coffee shop where I'd started spending Saturday mornings with a book, another reclaimed habit. We caught up over coffee that turned into lunch. Dave had remarried, had a stepson he adored, and ran a successful consulting business. We should grab a beer sometime, he suggested as we parted ways. Catch up properly. In the past, I would have deflected, knowing Gwen's reaction to me rekindling this friendship. Instead, I pulled out my phone and we scheduled it on the spot. That evening, Michael asked if I could help him practice basketball. We hadn't done that in months. Between work and the constant eggshell walking at home, I'd let these moments slip away. We played one-on-one in the driveway until the streetlights came on. When we finally stopped, sweaty and laughing, I caught Gwen watching from the window, her expression unreadable. "Dad," Michael asked as we put the ball away, "are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a freight train. I hadn't thought that far ahead, had only been focused on reclaiming my identity. "I don't know, buddy," I answered honestly. "Things are complicated right now." He nodded, bouncing the ball once more before tucking it under his arm. "Emma cries sometimes. She thinks it's her fault things are weird." My heart sank. It's absolutely not her fault. None of this is about you kids. "I know that," Michael said with a teenage eye roll. "But Emma's little. You should talk to her." That night, I went to Emma's room at bedtime. She was already in bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals. "Hey, princess, can we talk for a minute?" She nodded, eyes serious. I sat on the edge of her bed. "Michael mentioned you've been upset about Mom and me." Her lower lip trembled. "Are you going to leave us?" "No, sweetheart. Never." I pulled her into a hug. "Mom and I are having some grown-up problems, but we both love you and Michael more than anything. Nothing will ever change that. Promise?" she whispered. "I promise." After she fell asleep, I stood in the hallway, letting the reality sink in. I've been focused on my own liberation, but my kids were caught in the crossfire. Whatever happened between Gwen and me, I needed to make sure Michael and Emma felt secure. The next day, I signed us up for family counseling. Not marriage counseling, which felt like a lost cause, but support for the kids as we navigated whatever came next. When I told Gwen, she looked genuinely surprised. "You made an appointment?" Without consulting me. "The kids need support," I said simply. "They're confused and scared." For a moment, I glimpsed the woman I'd fallen in love with decades ago. Concerned mother, not manipulative spouse. "Thursday at 4 works for me," she said quietly. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was the first conversation we'd had in weeks that didn't feel like psychological warfare. For the kids' sake, maybe we could find a way to communicate again. Not as husband and wife, but as co-parents who both wanted the best for their children. 8 weeks into my transformation, the shift in Gwen's tactics became unmistakable. The cold shoulder and caustic remarks had given way to something I hadn't expected: desperation. It started subtly. She began appearing in doorways when I was changing, lingering a moment too long. She'd brush against me in the kitchen, a deliberate touch that was meant to seem accidental. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Then came the text while I was at work. "Remember that little black dress you liked? Thinking of wearing it tonight." I stared at my phone, bewildered. That dress hadn't made an appearance in years, not since before Emma was born. When I got home, she was waiting. Hair done, makeup perfect, that infamous dress clinging to curves she'd suddenly remembered how to accentuate. "The kids are at my sister's for the night," she announced, her voice honeyed in a way I hadn't heard in a decade. "I thought we could have dinner, just us." She prepared my favorite meal, opened an expensive bottle of wine, even put on music we'd listened to when dating. "What's all this about?" I asked, setting down my keys. "Can a wife want to spend time with her husband?" She moved closer, resting a hand on my chest. A month ago, this would have been exactly what I wanted. Now, it fell hollow, a tactical maneuver, not genuine affection. "Gwen," I said gently, stepping back. "Let's not pretend." Her smile faltered. "Pretend what?" "That I miss my husband." "You miss the control," I corrected. "Not me." Her expression hardened, then crumpled. For the first time in our marriage, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Is there someone else?" she whispered. That startled a laugh out of me. "No, this isn't about another woman. It's about finally recognizing what our relationship has become." She took a shuddering breath. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We're already in family counseling for the kids." "Marriage counseling," she clarified, a hint of irritation breaking through the vulnerability. "To save us." I studied her, wondering if any part of this was genuine. "Do you actually want that? Or are you just afraid of losing your comfortable arrangement?" Her eyes flashed. "How dare you? 20 years together, 2 children, and you think this was just convenient for me?" I think you liked having someone who never challenged you, who bent until he broke just to keep the peace. I kept my voice level. That's not a partnership, Gwen. That's ownership. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she turned and walked upstairs, the black dress swishing angrily around her knees. Later that night, as I read in the guest room, my phone lit up with a notification. Gwen had posted on social media for the first time in weeks, a throwback photo of us from years ago, captioned with heart emojis. The performance had begun. To the outside world, she was a loving wife trying to save her marriage. Only I knew the truth. She was fighting not for love, but for control she could no longer maintain. And I was completely immune to the manipulation that once would have drawn me back in. Our first family therapy session was eye-opening. Dr. Melissa Reed, a calm woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach, created a safe space for the kids to express their feelings. Michael was stoic but admitted feeling caught in the middle. Emma, despite her young age, articulated her fears with heartbreaking clarity. "I'm afraid everyone will leave and never come back," she whispered, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Dr. Reed helped us establish guidelines for co-parenting through this transition. We agreed to never badmouth each other to the kids, to maintain consistent routines, and to have weekly family meetings where everyone could voice concerns. As we left, Gwen grabbed my arm. "Can we talk privately? Just for a minute." The kids were already heading to the car, so I nodded. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Maybe we should try marriage counseling too, for the kids' sake." The old Daniel would have jumped at this opening, desperate to fix things. The new me recognized it for what it was, another attempt to draw me back into orbit. "The kids need us to be good co-parents," I replied. "Not necessarily married." Her fingers tightened on my arm. "So you're just giving up? 20 years means nothing." "I'm not giving up, Gwen. I'm moving forward." That weekend was my turn to have the kids for our new, unofficial arrangement. I took them camping at Lake Thompson, something Gwen had always vetoed as too rustic. We fished, hiked, roasted marshmallows, and talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. On Sunday evening, I returned them to Gwen, who was waiting on the porch with a tight smile. "They need baths before school tomorrow," she said by way of greeting. "Already done," I replied. "And their homework's finished too." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh." As the kids headed inside with their backpacks, Gwen didn't immediately follow. "Daniel," she began, her voice soft. "I miss you." 3 words she'd never said during our marriage, not once. She'd shown anger, disappointment, and occasional approval, but never vulnerability. "You miss what I provided," I corrected gently. "Stability, compliance, someone to make decisions for." "That's not fair," she whispered, but there was no conviction behind it. We both knew the truth. She stepped closer. "We could start over. Go on dates again. Remember what it was like before things got complicated." The desperation in her eyes was something I'd never witnessed. She was using the one tactic she'd never had to employ before, pleading. "You know," I said quietly, "all those years when I begged for your attention, your affection, your respect, this is how I felt. Except you never gave an inch." She flinched as though I'd struck her. "I didn't know you were so unhappy." "You didn't want to know," I replied without malice. "And now I'm not unhappy anymore. That's the difference." I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "The kids said you're thinking of moving out." I nodded. "I've been looking at apartments closer to their school. So this is really happening." It wasn't a question. It already happened, Gwen. We just haven't made it official yet. As I drove away, I caught her reflection in my rearview mirror, standing alone on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, looking lost in a way I'd felt for 20 years. The roles had reversed completely, and for the first time, she understood what it meant to be the one without power. I found the perfect apartment, a modern 2-bedroom close to the kids' school with a small balcony overlooking a park. The leasing agent promised to hold it for me while I sorted out the paperwork. After 2 decades in a house that had never felt fully mine, the prospect of a space that was entirely my own felt like freedom. When I told the kids over dinner at their favorite pizza place, their reactions were mixed but not surprised. "Will we still see you?" Emma asked, her voice small. "All the time, I promised. You'll have your own rooms there. We'll work out a schedule that's fair for everyone." Michael studied me over his soda. "Mom's going to flip out." "That's for me to handle," I assured him. "Not your concern." I was right about Gwen's reaction, but wrong about the form it would take. Instead of anger, she launched a full-scale campaign to reclaim what she was losing. First came the legal threats. "My father's golf buddy is the best divorce attorney in the state," she warned. "He'll make sure you never see the kids." When that didn't work, she switched tactics. The next morning, I found her sobbing in the kitchen, looking deliberately disheveled. "I can't sleep. I can't eat," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "Please don't do this to our family." The performance was convincing, but I'd become immune to emotional manipulation. "We'll both get through this," I said gently, extracting my hand. "So will the kids." That evening, she went nuclear. I returned from work to find her and Emma baking cookies. Gwen wearing an apron, flour on her cheek, the perfect picture of maternal domesticity. "Daddy," Emma called, "we're making your favorite cookies." Gwen gave me a pointed look over our daughter's head. "See what you're throwing away?" Later, after Emma was in bed, Gwen approached me in the hallway. "Daniel, be reasonable. Where will you be on Christmas morning? When Emma has nightmares? When Michael has his championship games?" Her voice cracked with what seemed like genuine emotion. "They need their father at home. They need a father who's whole," I countered. "Not one who's been hollowed out, trying to meet impossible expectations." Her eyes flashed. "So this is all my fault?" "It's not about fault. It's about patterns we can't seem to break while living under the same roof." She crossed her arms. "You'll regret this. When you're alone in that sterile apartment while we're here in the home you built for us." "I built this house, Gwen. I never built a home here." The distinction seemed to strike her speechless. For a moment, I glimpsed real pain beneath the manipulation, the realization that I might actually be happier without her. Then her walls came back up. "Fine, if that's how you want it. But don't expect me to make this easy." "I never did," I replied quietly, walking away from the conversation and 20 years of emotional blackmail. Moving day arrived with unexpected drama. I'd hired movers for my personal belongings, planning to be in and out while Gwen took the kids to her mother's, a schedule we'd agreed on to minimize emotional fallout. I should have known better. When I arrived home that Saturday morning, the kids weren't gone. They were sitting on the living room couch, Gwen between them with an arm around each, her eyes red-rimmed from what appeared to be a morning of strategic crying. "Daddy, please don't go," Emma whispered, breaking away to run into my arms. Michael stayed on the couch, his expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment. He knew exactly what was happening. I lifted Emma, her small arms tight around my neck. "Remember what we talked about? How you'll have your own special room at my new place. This doesn't change how much I love you." Gwen stood, crossing her arms. "The movers called. They're running late." Her tone suggested this was somehow my fault. "That's fine," I replied evenly. "We can start loading my car with the smaller items. Or you could reconsider this whole thing," she countered. "Look at what you're doing to this family." Michael suddenly stood up. "Mom, stop it. Just stop." We all turned to him, surprised by the outburst. "You've been crying all morning, telling Emma that Dad doesn't love us anymore. It's not true, and it's not fair." His voice cracked, adolescence and emotion battling in his changing pitch. Gwen's face flushed. "Michael, you don't understand adult relationships." "I understand enough," he interrupted. "That explained everything. You're trying to make us choose sides, and it sucks." He grabbed his jacket from the back of the couch. "I'm going to Ryan's house. Call me when the drama is over." The door slammed behind him, leaving a stunned silence. Gwen recovered first, her expression shifting from shock to anger. "See what you've done? Turned my own son against me." "I've never said a negative word about you to the kids," I replied quietly, setting Emma down. "Can you say the same?" She had no answer for that. The movers arrived an hour later. While they loaded my belongings, I sat with Emma in her room, looking through the photo album I'd made her, pictures of us together, our phone numbers, the calendar showing when she'd be staying at my new place. "Will you and Mommy ever love each other again?" she asked, her small fingers tracing a photo of our family from happier times. "Your mom and I will always love you and Michael," I answered carefully. "And we'll always respect each other as your parents. But sometimes adults can't live together anymore, even when they try really hard." She nodded solemnly. "Michael says you'll be happier now." Out of the mouths of babes. "I think we'll all be happier eventually. Change is just hard at first." When the movers had finished, I found Gwen in the kitchen, gripping the counter like she might collapse without its support. "I'll pick the kids up Friday after school," I said, setting my house key on the island between us. She looked at the key, then at me. "This isn't over, Daniel." "It is for me," I replied, not unkindly. "I hope someday it can be for you too." As I pulled out of the driveway, Emma waved from the window. Behind her stood Gwen, her expression unreadable, but her posture that of someone witnessing the end of an era they never thought would conclude. In a way, she was right. This wasn't over. The battle for control had merely entered a new phase. 3 months after moving out, my new life had taken shape. The apartment felt like home, a place where Michael and Emma could relax without walking on eggshells. Our weekend routines evolved naturally. Farmers market on Saturdays, hiking or movies on Sundays, homework at the kitchen island while I cooked dinner. I'd filed for divorce, proposing joint custody and a fair division of assets. Gwen's response was swift and vicious. She demanded full custody, the house, and maximum alimony. "She's bluffing," my attorney assured me. "Standard opening position. She'll negotiate when she realizes the judge won't side with her." But Gwen wasn't interested in negotiation. She was waging war, not for the kids or the money, but for control she could no longer exert. The first mediation session devolved quickly. Daniel abandoned his family, she told the mediator, tears perfectly timed. "He's having a midlife crisis, completely neglecting his children's emotional needs." "That's not true, and you know it," I replied evenly. "I see the kids 3 days a week, attend every school event, and take them to all their activities during my time." "Because you're trying to look good for the court," she snapped, mask slipping momentarily. The mediator, a seasoned professional, wasn't easily manipulated. "Mrs. Crawford, I understand this is difficult, but characterizing your husband's behavior this way isn't productive." Gwen's strategy shifted after mediation failed. She began scheduling emergency appointments for the kids during my parenting time, then claimed I was uninvolved when I couldn't attend. She sent barrage of texts demanding immediate responses, then documented my unresponsiveness when I didn't reply within minutes. The breaking point came when Michael called me late one night. "Dad, can you come get me?" His voice sounded strange. "What's wrong, buddy?" "Mom's been crying for hours, saying you're trying to take us away from her. Emma's really scared. I tried to explain what you told us, but Mom just gets more upset." I drove over immediately, finding Emma huddled on the stairs in pajamas, Michael sitting beside her with his arm around her shoulders. Gwen was in the living room, phone in hand, clearly having just ended a call. "Perfect timing," she said coldly. "I was just speaking with my attorney about your emotional abuse." "The only one being emotionally abused here is Emma," I said quietly. "And Michael, forced to be the adult while you fall apart. How dare you?" "Kids, go pack overnight bags," I interrupted. "You're coming to my place tonight." Gwen stepped forward. "You can't just take them. It's not your time." Michael stood, tall and suddenly older than his 15 years. "We want to go with Dad." In that moment, something changed in Gwen's eyes, the realization that her manipulation had backfired completely. She'd pushed so hard that she'd lost not just her control over me, but potentially over the children too. "Fine," she whispered. "Go." It was the first battle she'd surrendered, and it marked the beginning of the end. 1 year after that fateful night when Gwen's ultimatum backfired, I stood in the courtroom as the judge finalized our divorce. The custody battle had ended with a whimper, not a bang. After the incident with the children, Gwen's attorney had quietly suggested she accept joint custody before the judge made a less favorable ruling. All parties are in agreement regarding the terms of divorce and custody arrangement, the judge confirmed, scanning the documents. "I hereby grant the dissolution of marriage between Daniel and Gwendolyn Crawford." The gavel's sharp crack marked the official end of 20 years together. I felt no sadness, only a profound sense of release. Gwen avoided my eyes as we left the courtroom. Her parents waited in the hallway to take her home. She'd moved in with them temporarily after selling the house, still struggling to accept the new reality. Outside the courthouse, Dave waited in his car to take me to lunch. Michael and Emma would join us after school to celebrate. Not the divorce itself, but the beginning of a healthier chapter for our family. "How'd it go?" Dave asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Surprisingly smooth." Gwen finally realized fighting was only hurting the kids. The past year had been transformative. My promotion at work came with a flexible schedule that allowed me to be more present for the children. The apartment had evolved into a true home, filled with laughter and honest conversations. Even my relationship with Gwen had improved slightly. Once she accepted the inevitability of our separation, she began focusing more on co-parenting than control. Michael had thrived in the new arrangement, his basketball team making it to state championships with me cheering from the bleachers at every game. Emma still had occasional tearful moments wishing her parents were together, but therapy had helped her understand that separated parents could be happier and healthier than miserable ones under one roof. That evening, as the kids played video games in the living room, I stepped onto my small balcony with a cup of coffee. The spring air carried the scent of new beginnings. My phone buzzed with a text from Gwen, a simple message confirming she'd pick up the kids from school on Monday. No manipulation, no passive-aggressive subtext, just co-parenting communication. My thoughts drifted to that night a year ago when she tried to use intimacy as a weapon, and I'd laughed instead of caving. Had I known then how that moment would change everything, I might have been terrified. Instead, it had been the first step toward reclaiming my life. The apartment door slid open behind me. Emma stepped out, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You okay, Daddy?" I smiled down at her. "I'm better than okay, Princess. Michael says we're celebrating today." "That's right. We're celebrating new beginnings." She seemed to consider this. "Mom said sometimes endings can be good things. Is that true?" I nodded, surprised and touched by Gwen's insight. "Some endings make room for better things to start." Emma leaned her head against me. "I think I understand now." Inside, Michael was trash-talking his video game opponent while simultaneously texting his friends. My coffee had cooled to the perfect temperature. The weight that had pressed on my chest for decades was gone. For the first time in 20 years, I was free, not just from a controlling marriage, but from the prison I'd built within myself by accepting her terms instead of setting my own. And that freedom was worth everything.
Bye.